Welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. This is Juan, and we are bringing you an episode fresh from the truck. We're actually got Craig Allaman, our lead agronomist, dialed in. And as many of you folks are aware of now and might be assessing your fields, that there was some weather events here a couple nights ago in north central Iowa, and there's been reports of some hail damage. So we want to touch base really quick with Craig, just so we can. What are some things that we need to assess, put our minds at ease while we wait for someone to come back out? So welcome, Craig. How you doing?
Not too bad. Been riding around west central Illinois with Carson down here, and just kind of looking at crops. And, not any issues down here, just kind of looking at progress. Corn looks really good, and like many areas, beans have been really slow to grow. They are starting to take off and looking pretty decent now. But we did have some tornadoes a week or so ago there in that storm we had down here around the Quad Cities area, but we have dodged the hail down here, but sounds like up there in northern Iowa they have not. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate. We especially the northern part of Iowa. Corn, beans are in a lot of different stages, but we're at the point where the growing points are above the ground now, at least for corn there. And what are folks going to look for if they had the misfortune of getting some dinged with some hail, and they're waiting for someone to come out? What are some of those first steps you recommend folks to do?
well, similar for corn or beans, you really want to wait at least 4 or 5 days before you evaluate the crop to determine what it's going to do, because you need to have time for the new growth to come out on both corn and soybeans. Bad part about that is, what are we, June the 13th here today? So we could still plant corn depending on where you're at. If you wanted to plant a real early corn, if that was part of your decision, and of course soybeans, we're still in a great window to plant soybean replant here if we needed to. But with corn, that growing point is at the surface at about V6, and I think up there in that northern Iowa, from what I've been able to tell, we're probably anywhere from V5 to V7 when most of that corn was. So at that V6 or 7, that growing point is either right at the surface or maybe barely above. But you would have to get hailed clear down to that area and injure that growing point for that plant to actually be killed. So you would assume that a lot of that corn is going to go ahead and new growth is down there, at ground level and just above, and it should go ahead and grow. Not going to be as good of a plant as if we did strip all the leaves off this time of the year, but it could survive. Just again, depending on how bad that damage was. With soybeans, the main growing point on the soybeans, of course, is always at the top of the plant, the apical meristem, and any kind of decent hail, that's going to be knocked off. But a soybean plant will have an axillary bud at each node on the plant, clear down as far as the cotyledon node, which is the lowest node there. So as long as you don't cut that plant off below the cotyledon node, it can go ahead and activate that axillary bud down there at the cotyledon stage, or even the unifoliate node, the next one up, or any node at all, and that actually will grow into a plant that produces pretty close to anyway 95 to 100% yield. So you have a lot better potential with a soybean plant, to grow back under those conditions. And that's why you wait 4 or 5 days, because by that time you're going to be able to see if that axillary bud has been activated, if it's there, And then you take stand count into account. Do we have 80,000 plants that have axillary buds activated and are going to turn into a producing plant or not?
Is
It's pretty much a
there
replay decision. But
is there a sweet spot for stand count on corn that you like to see? I mean, I realize every tillage practices might vary and other factors, but
well, you would take probably a lot of things into account. There's plenty of charts that show you if you have a stand of 20,000 that was planted last week in April versus planting a perfect stand today, that 20,000 stand's gonna be a lot better yield potential. But you don't have 20,000, plants that are fine now. You got hail damaged plants, and they're never gonna, they're gonna be so far behind. So there, it's a, it's really a, probably nothing is a wrong answer when you're making that decision. It's a very tough decision to make, but when you're hailed that bad, you're getting your insurance person involved first, and both, crop insurance and regular hail, hail wind insurance type of thing. And you'll have an adjuster come out, and, they'll give you your options. And your decision is going to be based on what your insurance is going to do at that point in time. So there'll be a lot of help along the way in making that decision.
No, absolutely, and that's kind of one of the goals with this one is how it goes with like anything when things are fit, everybody needs the person to either spray or when an event like this happens, the insurance person is kind of driving all across country, right, waiting for it, and our thought is if you need a little bit of guidance to get your to decide whether or not you're gonna have to replant it, there's some things you could be doing to at least assess it. But really, what I'm hearing you saying is really most importantly, one, call your insurance person. Two, give it 3 to 5 days, 4 to 5 days to see if it grows out of it. Right, it's probably gonna look really ugly at first, but you might be surprised down the road. Um, and then from there is probably a way out that what you've got left and kind of compare. I like that you pointed that out, is that you'll have stand left, but it's damaged stand, like you've said before. That's a wound is a vector for disease, right? And so it can set you up for something different down the road. So we'll make sure that we link on the show notes a really great extension article on really kind of like what you talked about, but it also includes those charts so we can see the assessment of what studies have shown in those areas, right? What that yield looks like, what certain stand that's left versus that. Last question on that. Let's assume it is bad. A person's gonna have to replant. We're June, like I said, June 13th now. I would say today is like day 3 of folks letting it grow out. We're switching maturities. If we're putting in 110-day corn, oh, we're obviously going down, right? What's your guidance on that?
Yeah, you're going to want to put an earlier corn in, at a mid-June time frame, but you probably don't need to overcorrect and get too crazy on that, and leave too much, too much yield on the table. Also, if you're in a 110-day zone, you want to make sure you're going to be using a northern hybrid, really. So you want to make sure and check very carefully with your seed company, with your seed rep, that's a hybrid that will come south, because the 110-day, stress, heat and drought stress during August is way different than in a 100-day maturity zone. So if I'm usually putting 110 in, I'm probably dropping down 104, 105. I probably don't have any need to drop down to 100. Corn, when the corn plant comes out of the ground, it's going to know how long the days are compared to normal, and it's going to speed its process up, to get to harvest. So, that's why we don't need to overcorrect. The plant will correct itself to some extent, and will get mature quicker than it normally would have if it was planted end of April, 1st of May. So
Oh,
that would be my advice: is don't overcorrect, and make sure that hybrid will take the heat and drought stress, where you're going to be planting.
see, this is why I knew it was good we put it out there. There's a lot of good content out there. We're not repeating very many things that are different from what we're seeing at other companies or other universities. But what I know I didn't see when doing research for this was being mindful of your selection, right? And like you said, not every hybrid moves south, east, or west, and you and the team are hyper focused on really drilling in product to the area that it needs to go. So that makes
Yep.
sense. Well, I don't
Yeah,
want to.
and on the soybean side, kind of the same question. Always when we're doing late replanting on soybeans, or even like a double crop, used to be in the past they'd say go ultra full season with your soybeans, which was backwards of what you would do with corn. And it has to do with beans uh, being indeterminate, in their growth pattern and just continuing to grow all through it, or reproduce while it's growing. So we can do vegetative and reproductive stage with beans both. But the more recent, the more modern studies with that is you go about mid-range of what you normally plant. So I plant a 2.8 to a 3.6. So if I'm replanting or planting late, I'm probably going to drop in there about that 3.3, 3.4, something like that. So that's your recommendation on soybeans.
Perfect. So yeah, recap that corn. Don't overcorrect and don't stray too far away. Pay attention to don't just grab that hybrid that's sitting in the shed that hasn't been returned back yet, if you can avoid it, obviously, right? And then with beans about half the range of what the maturity age that you regularly go. So thank you. I want to be respectful of your time because, like I said, I know you've been driving all across the state and fixing to go home for Father's Day weekend. One last question that I had come in earlier in the week. Brad Grand George, one of the new sales managers newer to our team here. For him, he is newer to last place he was at, he didn't have access to all the selection that we do, and so one of the trait packages that it was new to him was Power Core Enlist corn, and he reached out and he was talking about purple corn, right? Purple corn syndrome, and was just curious about it. And I know his question's been answered, but we've been getting a lot of new customers this year. And what can you tell us a little bit about if you're seeing purple corn out there? Um, what's that mean? What could it mean?
Well, there's most times there's a couple of things happening. Number one, there are plenty of genetics out there on the market that are naturally much more purple than other genetics, and particularly at the bottom of the plant will be pretty purple. The bottom 2-3 inches around the stalk, and then even some more purpling up throughout the plant. So that could be part of it. And the Corteva stuff in general has always been one of the genetic companies that has a lot of that in the lineup. I've seen a lot of purpling in the Syngenta stuff and things through the years, not so much out of the Bayer camp, although you'll have some. There's going to be genetic diversity, but so you'll see that a lot of times. That's just natural. That's just what that genetic material is putting out. But the other reason that we see purple corn, particularly this time of the year, during that, I'm going to say emergence to knee high roughly, is going to be a phosphorus deficiency showing in the plant. And that doesn't mean that you're deficient in the soil of phosphorus. It means that for a temporary period of time that your roots have not been growing to the phosphorus. Phosphorus is going to be pretty immobile in the soil. It's a negatively charged ion and normally wouldn't even be held in the soil, but it's attracted to metals in the soil. So, metals, we got iron, copper, zinc, all kinds of metals in our soil. And so it's pretty attached to that. The roots need to grow to the phosphorus. A lot of the reasons why we put phosphorus on, it's an important starter fertilizer in soils that, that it maybe aren't high in phosphorus. So you take this year as a good example. We've had a very cool May, so the early growth on corn, there's time frames when the roots aren't growing very quickly, because it's been cool, and so temporarily that corn will get a purple color on it. I mean, literally all up and down the leaves can be various degrees of purple, which is probably what Brad was seeing out there. He was seeing kind of a whole field that had that cast to it. And those are usually temporary. So as soon as we get good warm conditions, and the corn really starts taking off and growing like it did here a week or so ago, we were seeing the yellow flash from the corn growing so quickly, coming out of a slower growth period of time. But when we get those warm periods, the roots take off, start growing again. They're going to get out there and reach the phosphorus that's in the soil. And then that purple's going to go away at that time. So you're probably seeing one of the two things
Okay.
out there now.
And then, keep an eye on it. If it's genetic, it's either going to be genetic. It's just how it expresses itself. And if it's more than likely, like you said, the cooler soils, the root growth, which makes sense. So and most folks, many folks will attest. I guess the moment that they become aware of that, everybody would agree. Oh yeah, it's been cold. It's been coming out of
Yeah.
the ground slow, but
Yeah, and anytime I see a nutrient deficiency, any time of the year, my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dig some plants up and see what's going on with the roots, see what's going on underneath or with the soil. You don't want to ignore it. So you would check your soil samples, make sure you're not deficient in phosphorus, to see if you need to make a plan to correct that. If you are, if your roots aren't growing well, make sure it's just from a cool period or a dry period or whatever it may be. And make sure you don't have compaction or something else going on in the soil to restrict that root growth. I mean, I've seen phosphorus deficiency in soybeans before, and you dig them up and there's a hard pan like an inch deep, and the taproot went down an inch and then completely went sideways, made a 90-degree turn, and it's just not able to get down and get potash because we had such bad compaction. So you do want to follow that up, make sure that there's nothing else that's going on that you would need to address because of that nutrient deficiency. But if it's just because of cool weather and it's going to come out of it when we start growing again, then you don't have any worries.
all right. Thank you, Craig. That is super helpful information. Super interesting. I'm gonna make sure that I'm also gonna link in the show notes the other video that Brad had sent us in case folks are nerdy like me and want to check out the some deeper info on the genetic expression of the
Yeah,
purple corn.
yeah, Juan, that's what Carson Bloomberg and I were doing this morning. We were getting with some customers. We were pausing, taking some time out, visiting a little bit, and then we were walking their fields and looking and seeing what we could find out there. We also took time to pause and go have lunch at the Twisted Sisters, one of my favorite eating places down there.
So it's pause, walk,
Oh,
look, but it
oh,
pause, scout, and eat
oh,
is the next one.
yeah. Well, you have to have nourishment to continue the day. But one of the best tenderloins in this part of the world, and I had a throwback hamburger instead,
Mm.
which was their homemade version of a Big Mac. It was quite delicious.
Oh, well,
So
that's
I'm just saying.
Twisted Sisters. Here I come. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Twisted Sister. Yep,
Oh
yep.
man,
Between Abington and Avon.
look
Yeah,
at that. I
yeah.
know they sure will appreciate it. That's Craig. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Anybody listening, we hope that you have a wonderful Father's Day, and we appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to us talk. So until the next one.